This is Hamilcar, and we've kind of come down now to the final turn of Hamilcar. And this is a tight game. You're going to look at all of the politically relevant provinces and objectives in the game. And you can see here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Carthaginian, and there are 7 Rome. So Rome leads by 1 point. There's one open objective, and that is control of key Mediterranean ports. If whoever has a majority of those, right now no one does. There's 4 and 4, Panormus, Lipara, Neapolis, and Rome. Rome has those. The 2 ports in Corsica, as well as Utica and Lilybaeum, are controlled by Carthage. So that's probably going to be the swing vote in the final turn. The way the game works is the number of cards you draw, and everything's upside down, unfortunately, from the camera angle, but you draw 6 cards, 7 cards, 8 cards, 9 cards. This is the big turn right in the middle, and then it starts to go down in terms of card count. So the final turn, it's only going to be 6 card hand. And the way leaders work in the game is kind of cool when you compare it to Hannibal. So there's a really pivotal leader draw that's about to take place. The way leaders work in the game for the Romans is you can, as in Hannibal, preserve 1 leader as your proconsul, and then you're going to elect 2 consuls, and you're going to draw them out of a pool, which is a deck of leader cards. And the way, because I have one of the expansions from the Kickstarter, I do have an extra leader in there, so I'm not guaranteed to draw the best Roman leader of this era, which is Regulus. He's one of those 3. So there's a 33% chance Rome doesn't get him. If they don't get him, I think that Carthage has a really good shot of winning the game because their best leader is now in play. That is Hamilcar. And so Hamilcar, he's the only one that's upright. Hamilcar and 2 other leaders are positioned in Lilybaeum right now. How it works for the Carthaginians is at the beginning of the game, all their leaders are removed from the board. You collect the leader that's named on the turn track. For the final turn, there isn't any. But if Hamilcar's on the board, then you get to he gets to stay there. He's never eliminated at the end of the turn. So he's a permanent fixture, and he's a 1-3 leader. So he's got a great battle rating, and he's got a battle rating of 4 if he's the original defender. So he's hard to attack, and that's an important, very important deal in ground combat in the game. So that's the situation going into the final turn. The naval battles in the last few turns have been really exciting. Right now, I think Carthage is going to start the turn, and they're going to have 1 more fleet than the Romans will have. They have naval superiority, which is a huge bonus for them going into the final round. I think if they didn't have that, they would have a hard time winning this final round, but having that, I think, gives them an edge because they get to decide whether they're going to go first or second. And I think they're going to want to go. They're going to want to finish second in order to get the last play in the turn. There's no dictator played this round or this game because there was never a situation, except maybe on turn 1, where the dictator could have been played because Carthage never got a big enough advantage in terms of control of politically relevant regions for the dictator to actually be played. So that never came into play, and it won't come into play. We can just actually remove it at this point. So this is the starting position. What we'll go ahead and do now is do the consul elections for Rome. Carthage is going to begin by putting a combat unit into Lilybaeum. We're just going to keep building that up. Yeah, Rome could invade Libya, but it would be a risky move on their part. Really, all they got to do is hold what they have to win the game and keep Carthage from grabbing one of these politically significant bases like Panormus and Lipara. I think are the 2 biggest Carthaginian targets this turn. They're probably not going to have enough strength or time with 6 cards to take back Sicily because that would involve flipping a number of locations, and they just don't have the ground strength to be able to do that. So it's going to come down to control of one of these 2 bases, and that's going to be the major factor, and keeping Rome out of Corsica. So I'm probably going to go ahead and build up their army there with their staple 1 combat unit reinforcement. They're going to get 2 more from the Miat, which is the government in Carthage. If you control 2 spaces in here, you get the reinforcement in between, which can be either a troop, a combat unit, or a fleet. And so what I'll probably do is split this, have 1 extra combat unit and 1 extra fleet. And then we'll get rid of these 2 leaders. All of their leaders are removed except Hamilcar Barca, and then they get shuffled up, and you're going to draw 2 out. So they can have leaders keep coming back time and time again, whereas the Romans, once their leaders go out of play at the end of a turn and you elect 2 new consuls, unless you retain them as a proconsul, you will never see that Roman leader again in the course of the game. So that's something that's different from Hannibal. So Hamilcar does capture the essence of Roman politics during this time. So for Carthage, it's a real crapshoot. They're going to get 1 more leader for sure, and Hamilcar Barca. They don't have, if they controlled this space, they would get a leader. So if you control 2 spaces with the leader in between, you get a leader card. So if they added 1 more PC here, they would have gotten 2 more leaders. As it is, they're going to lose all these and draw 1 random in addition to Hamilcar Barca, and it's going to be up to them and whatever strategy cards they pull to see if they can pull off a win late in the final turn of Hamilcar. Here's the result of the leadership draw. Of course, Hamilcar Barca is not removed from the Carthaginian side, so they get 1 random from their pool of leaders that we've seen before. And they chose Carthalo. That's the one that was pulled. And I like that pull. I think that's a nice one. May flip an enemy PC or remove 1 siege point across 1 ceiling instead of making a move. That could be huge, especially if you're going last. So they definitely want to use their naval supremacy to go last. So Rome does not have this thing locked down. On the Roman side, of course, it was Regulus was one of the 3. I think he was the top card in that group of 3 that was yet to be drawn. And we got Possumus Megalus. So this is your best leader. He can invade Africa. He's an admiral. He's an aristocrat. He's everything. He can continue battle, moving after battle, and so he's your heavy hitter. He's the guy that you want to ideally pull early in the game and then proconsul him for the rest of the game if you can. Believe it or not, that's harder to do than you think, because if you send him to Sicily, your troops wear down there, and getting troops from Rome, that all your reinforcements come into Rome, shuttling them to Italy is problematic because you run the risk of them being intercepted by Carthaginian fleets unless you take the 3 activations worth of marching them around into the island. So it's hard to maintain operational tempo in Sicily without a good leader, and so this is a good pull for them. The guy that they could have ended up with is from the Kickstarter, and it's Claudius Pulcher, and he does have a nice feat. This is good. If you pull him early in the game, it's always good to pull an admiral because he can do naval reforms, and his special ability is a really cool one, even if his ratings are not particularly exciting. And so that's the situation. They went ahead and used the naval reform from Regulus. He's got a battle rating of 3, so I went ahead and converted 3 of the 6 reinforcements that come into Rome. I converted them into ships, so I think they have a 1 fleet edge on the Carthaginians after all of the builds and everything were done. So Rome's got a powerful force. They have a 1 PC lead. Can they hold it? Let's look at what they drew. They drew a minor campaign. It's nice, can be able to move 2 leaders around. Siege engines. This could be a game changer, because I think this gives, if Regulus or the other leader here could get to the island of Sicily, if the Carthaginians take heavy ground losses in ground combat, they might win some battles. Like they might win a battle or 2, but if you could force a siege of Lilybaeum, that card right there could be huge, because taking Lilybaeum would definitely seal the bargain, because Lilybaeum is its own politically significant city. So that would be just one more marker here on the track. That would be really, really nice for them. But I don't know if 6 cards is enough to get that done. And you do have some really good cards to win land battles in Sicily. You do have an ambush card, which will improve your general's battle rating. Sicilian allies desert. That doesn't really help them because the Romans have the allies and Sicily locked down. So we probably won't use that as a reaction, but this would be a good reaction play. And of course, you have a forced march, which allows you to take land units and move them the slow route, but the safe route. You're not going to end up with a naval battle that you could potentially lose. So I think that maybe the strategy, we could try out a couple of things. We could try marching this guy in to join up with the proconsul. He's got a better general's rating, so you don't necessarily want to leave. Like if he's in the stack, he's going to be the ranking general, and his battle ratings are not as good as him. So you want to ideally drop off enough troops to bring him up to strength, but leave enough. You got to have at least 3 combat units with your consul. So it would be ideal if he could drop off some and then maybe return to Lipara as a defensive buffer. Another option would be to take Regulus and try to sail him over to Panormus, and because he could win a naval battle. I mean, he could just use the shortcut passage into Panormus. The problem is we have not seen Cruel Sea. Cruel Sea is a card that can really hurt Rome if they travel across these connections with lightning bolts. So we know that we didn't draw it, but the Carthaginians might have, so I probably don't want to risk that on the last turn. So you probably have to take the slower sea route. 1, 2, 3 connections. Because of the naval reform situation, they can only use 3 of their 4 movement points across sea connections. So unless you risk the lightning bolt to your fleet, or 3 lightning bolts to take the shortcut through the Tyrrhenian, you're probably looking at having to use the land route. But ideally, if we can get a leader into here and a leader into here, just hold those down, I think that wins the game for Rome. That would be the cautious and safe route. And again, we're not going to use the dictator because the situation never presented itself. If it does, if this becomes an eligible play in this last turn, Rome's going to lose the game anyway, so we can just get rid of that. All right, let's look at what Carthage drew. They drew a couple really nasty events that could swing the game in their favor. First of all, his ability could be devastating to Rome. The revolt could cause them to lose a province in Italy, and if there's a tie in a number of provinces that are controlled, I think that Carthage wins the ties. So this is a really nice event for them. Punic Faith allows them to cancel a card that's played by Rome. Cancel the event, or you can make them play with an open hand. Diplomacy is nice. You can flip a space over, and again, that might be enough to swing a province as well. You don't have to necessarily use that to, take one of these ports. First of all, you'd have to clear the combat units out of there, and that's not a guaranteed thing. But you could use it up here in Etruria to take a province away. I mean, there's a number of ways that you can hurt Rome with that event. And so there's a couple of them here that could really be nasty. Pestilence only affects besieging armies. So if they choose to besiege Lilybaeum, this could probably keep the Lilybaeum intact. So we want to hold on to this just as a precaution against losing Lilybaeum, which would be to lose the game. This event won't come into play because we don't have any generals in Africa. We're going to keep both Himilco and Hamilcar in Lilybaeum. This is the linchpin of the game. And so from here, all of your naval interceptions have to originate from either Carthage, Syracuse, or Rome, and Carthage only controls Carthage now. So from here you can go 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can intercept into that base. You can intercept moves into Lipara to reinforce. You can intercept as far as Messana and Rhegium. So that really is the ideal location for them. So that's the situation at the start of this final epic turn, and we'll see how the whole thing ends up playing out. Well, if you look at the map, it doesn't look like much of anything has changed, unless you look really carefully. But we had a very exciting 6-card turn, and pretty much led off the way I said I probably would. I would go ahead and take the 2 consuls, park Regulus and Lipara. That enables him to be reactionary enough, either from Syracuse or from Rome, to guard what I felt was the 2 critical spaces in the turn. And then the other consul, I was able to get him up to reinforce the proconsul, who was nearly defeated in a what we would call a repulse. Hamilcar Barca led his elephants out of Lilybaeum to Panormus. Had a good chance of winning the game, but then the Romans played their reactionary ambush card, and that gave the Romans a decided edge in the battle. Despite the fact that the elephant charge was successful, it wasn't enough to turn the tide in Carthage's favor. So pretty much after that repulse and then the reinforcement of the proconsul in Panormus, it made it unlikely that Hamilcar Barca would be able to achieve a meaningful victory and take that particular location. So with Carthage at this point, I decided to, because the Romans went first and played a reactionary card, which I could have canceled with Carthage, but I felt like it was best to have the card advantage versus canceling the ambush. Because even if he loses this, I'm drawing attention to this area while I'm holding in my pocket a strategy card that's going to be decisive over here, provided I get the last play and the Romans don't respond to that area. So I used my last couple plays to go ahead and send the other Carthaginian leader, I think that's Carthalo, back to Carthage, and I used the Numidians to get reinforcements. Made it look like I'm setting up for a desperation move, and that pretty much freezes Regulus, who had reinforced Lipara, to stay there. And that's exactly what I want. I didn't want him making any kind of reactionary moves. I wanted him to stay exactly there. This was all just a feint. And so Rome then used its last card to reinforce PC markers where there was a chance that maybe this guy runs the gauntlet and successfully lands, and then they convert 1 space. I wanted to keep that from happening if possible. So with the Romans' last card, I felt like the best play was to play PCs there. Oh, and the revolt took place down in Lucania. The Carthaginians played the revolt event. That forced the Romans to play a card down here for PCs. So basically, I baited them into being stationary with their armies, playing PCs where I really didn't care if they played them or not. They placed their other one here to make sure they had Sicilia locked down. And then with the last card play for the Carthaginians, I used diplomacy here to flip this space, and that isolated the Roman control marker in Pisae, thus depriving Rome control of Etruria. And that means the flag count. The final flag count is even Stevens, so the tie goes to the Carthaginians, and Carthaginians eke out a win. It still was very close because even in the winter quarters, you total up the op value of all the cards played. Whoever played the higher amount has to concede something to the player that played the lower amount. And Carthage had played an op value of 1 greater than the Romans did. So if the Carthaginians don't have a supply train somewhere on the board to remove, the consequence would be that the Romans would get to place a PC marker, which would have given them control. They could have plopped it right back down there. Even though it's isolated, the winter quarters phase is already over, and they would have regained control of Etruria and won the game. So it was very fortunate that the Carthaginians had one last supply train in Lilybaeum to liquidate to prevent that disaster. I did not engage in a naval battle. That's how the Romans got naval superiorities. When they moved into Lipara, Carthage could have intercepted that and forced a naval battle, but I didn't feel like the odds were really it was not in Carthage's interest. They couldn't afford to lose PC markers after a disastrous battle outcome. And they would only be getting 2 tactics cards, whereas Regulus would be getting 4. 1 because it's a friendly place, and he's got a battle rating of 3. I just didn't like those odds. I didn't feel like the situation was desperate enough to warrant that. So I opted to go ahead and concede reluctantly the naval superiority. See, if you have the opportunity to intercept and you don't, you concede the naval supremacy to the other player. And that's how naval battles are going to happen. Naval battles only happen in the event that there's an interception. So you don't have to intercept, but if you don't, there's a cost to it. The downside to that, then, of course, is that if they want to make an end run to maybe try to capture Agrigentum, which you could do conceivably in one turn, move, roll. If you roll right on that red die, you could flip that city and be right back in business in Sicily. However, without naval superiority, you have to roll the white die, and you'll never take it in one turn. So there was a cost to conceding that, but I feel like the overall objective was obtained by luring the Romans into a state where they're having to kind of watch what the force with Carthallo is about to do, because he can remove PC markers. So it's like, what is he up to? What can he do that I'm not aware of? And the end result, having that diplomacy card was really the clincher. If Romans had not played the ambush card, this could have been a really violent turn, because then they would have had to have counterattacked, and things could have gotten really interesting. So I felt like the Romans really did have to play that ambush card, but the cost to that was that they were going to give the Carthaginians 2 plays unanswered at the end of the turn, and in fact that proved to be decisive, although just barely. So really, really close game. What do I think of Hamilcar versus Hannibal? Well, what you have here is, this is exactly what I was hoping this game would be. I was really disappointed in the 20th anniversary edition, because this was not really a clean design. It was basically an overchromed scenario that didn't really work. Now it's like its own game. It's included in the box with Hannibal, and it is its own game. It's not just a reskinned game of Hannibal. It's a completely different game. Totally has a First Punic War feel to it. It's an excellent design. There are some issues with the rules. So I'm going to say this about the rule book and the play aid. First of all, the rule book, or let's talk about the play aid just really quickly. The play aid has a typo. There's a fragment here. There's a fragment of text that's helpful, but it's like in the middle of it, like it doesn't really belong here. I don't know why it's there. It doesn't go with the paragraph or anything, but so that's kind of bizarre. The other issue is in the sequence of play here, when it tells you to place 1 ready warship in the at-port box, 1 CU with any general or in a controlled or unbesieged walled city, gain additional CUs as indicated by the Miat, that's the government spaces here, or convert to ready warships. Remove all generals from the pool except Hamilcar Barca. Place the general from the game turn track and additional generals as allowed by the Miat with CUs or in controlled unbesieged wall cities. Okay, all that sounds very straightforward. What it does not tell you is you always get 1 additional general in addition to whatever's on the track. That's printed in the rule book, but it's not here on the play aid, and that's unfortunate when you're first learning the game. My advice to you is do not rely on this when you're first learning the game. So that was the major issue I found with the play aid. There may be a couple other small issues like that on here, so you have to kind of go with the rule book, especially in the beginning. There are a couple instances in the rule book where some clarity is really required when you get to the issue of naval battles. It's very, very important that you work through not just the rules, but work through the play example, because you're going to find clarity in here that is not included in the rules body. For example, when claiming an enemy warship, an enemy prize, it tells you that all, let's see here, claim prizes. You may claim up to half of the prizes from your opponent's at-sea box. It doesn't tell you whether that's rounded up or rounded down. And hello, that really does make a difference. You find the answer to that in the example play. So, short story is, read the rulebook very carefully, read all of the examples of play, and then you should be fine. So once I've done that, then I didn't really have any other issues, extrapolating what the design intent is from the rulebook. Still not as clean as Hannibal, but it's still a very, very good game. So Hamilcar, the second game from Hannibal, and Hamilcar from Phalanx Games. It's a real winner in my book. I've enjoyed it, played several games now, and this one here is going to be a favorite right along with Hannibal.